Bogoni bupirima reka ele morena kawena reka ema ratswarana au morena ore khoche leseding rechoroche waar die wilgers welig spruit door een boom sy skadu sprei soos ons groei in kundigheid mag U ons lei sien ons hoe hier lei met die hand laat U sien rus oor ons land. Three strong streams united flow, Africa stands proud and tall. As we learn, we trust, we know God is in control. Bless us, O Lord, guide us with grace. May Northwest be blessed always. Bless us, O Lord, sien ons lief. Ore Jehovah Tsemporena, sien ons, bless us, O Lord.
Good evening, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor du Plessis, Executive Dean, Professor Modise, Deputy Deans, Professor van der Westhuizen, Professor Drummond, and Professor Madupi, members of the University Executive and any other faculty management, colleagues and friends. It's a great pleasure for me to open this important occasion on behalf of Prof. Luke Sandom. I decided to select two Bible verses today, which call on the reader to reflect on the blessings we enjoy every day. In this current time, it's easy to forget our blessings as we navigate the way through a truly tragic and difficult period in humanity. So the first reading is a reading from Psalms 95, verses 1 to 5. Come, let us sing joyful to the Lord. Cry out to the rock of our salvation. Let us greet him with song of praise. Joyful sing out our psalms. For the Lord is the great God, the great King over all gods, whose hand holds the depths of the earth, who owns the top of the mountains. The sea and the dry land belongs to God, who made them, formed them by hand. The second reading is a reading from Philippians 4, verses 4 to 8. Rejoice in the Lord always. I shall say it again, rejoice. Your kindness should be known to all. The Lord is near. Have no anxiety at all, but in everything, by praying and petition with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. Then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, and if there's anything worth of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Then the God of peace will be with you. Paul reminds us in the reading that to be sure to give thanks and reflect on the graces that God holds really dear to himself. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, thank you for the opportunity to gather together to celebrate Luke's work as an academic. We give thanks for his life and the contribution that he has made to the lives of staff and students at our institution. Help each one of us recognize the blessings that we enjoy every day. Empower people around the globe to cope with their daily burdens. Bless each person present here today or following these proceedings remotely. In particular, Lord, I ask that you bless Professor Luke and his family. We ask this in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to recognize the following functionaries and distinguished guests present here and online on the video. First of all, where's Prof. Luke sitting? Just say there. Prof. Luke Sandham, welcome to you and your wife, Eleanor. Prof. Linda du Plessis, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Vice Principal of the Northwest University. Prof. David Modise, the Executive Dean for the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences. Then Prof. Helen Drummond, the Deputy Dean for Teaching and Learning of the Faculty for Natural and Agricultural Sciences. Then Prof. Stuart Picketh, the Line Manager of Prof. Luke and the Director of the School for Geo and Spatial Sciences. I'm not sure if Prof. Carlos Besaino, there you are, thanks, good to see you there. Prof. Carlos Besaino, the Director of the Research Unit for Environmental Sciences and Management. Welcome to you and your wife. And colleagues, there's quite a lot of special past and current members of the faculty here, former directors here that was involved in Prof. Luke's career. A special welcome to you as well tonight. Ek dink 'n hartlike welkom, spesiale hartlike welkom aan Prof. Luke se dogter. Baie familie en vriende ook vanaand hierso spesifiek. Jou dogter Debbie, can I see where you are, please? A special word of welcome. I believe you flew in from the USA recently, so it's quite special to do that. I'm sure they're very excited to have you here as well tonight. Also, I believe also online here is your wife, Mark, and Helen, your daughter, that's streaming in from the USA and from Vietnam. Is that correct? That's good to hear. Welcome to you, especially also tonight. Then two of Prof. Luke's brothers, Tim and Matt Sandham. Can I just see where you are as well? Special welcome to you as well tonight. Dan ook ander familie en vriende van Prof. Luke wat ver gereis het om hier te wees. Baie hartlik welkom aan julle. Colleagues, friends, I hope that you will enjoy the evening, and I'm going to hand over now to Prof. David Modise to introduce Prof. Luke as a speaker tonight.
Evening, colleagues. As you can see, I'm a little bit vertically challenged. So, compared to the two speakers that were here. Greetings to you all, Dames and Here, and a warm welcome to the inaugural lecture of Prof. Luke Sandham. of the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences here at our Potchefstroom campus. I wish to acknowledge the presence of Prof. Linda du Plessis, the Vice Chancellor, the Vice Principal rather, and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Planning and Van der Bijlpark Operations. She came all the way from Van der Bijlpark, Prof. Luke. Of course, I know there are people who are coming from further, overseas, etc. But we always appreciate your presence, Prof. Linda. Prof. Linda is also officiating today, and she has been doing so for quite a number of lectures, in our faculty over the years, including my own inaugural lecture. I know you have all been welcomed by the Deputy Dean of Research and Innovation, Prof. Francois. But I would like also to note the presence of other Deputy Deans, Prof. Helen Drummond, the Deputy Dean of Teaching and Learning, and then, of course, many other directors in the faculty, Professor Stuart Pickett, who has already been welcomed, and as well as Prof. Carlos. I will not mention all the directors by name because I know some of them are probably somewhere watching this virtually. And Prof. Luke has been with the university for quite a long time. So I can imagine there will be other people somewhere who have an interest in him. Of course, he is the most important person today. We welcome you, Prof. Luke, your family and friends, and all staff members that are present here and visitors. It is quite heartwarming to see that this inaugural lecture of Prof. Luke is well supported, and the attendance is great, even virtually. Ordinarily, Prof. Linda, this hall would even be bursting at its seams, but obviously because of the COVID-19 restrictions, we just managed to have this many people. But still, it is quite an impressive attendance. This year, this is the 5th inaugural lecture. And our faculty prides itself, in terms of academic excellence. And we still have another one to go, Prof. Linda, I hope it's still you, before the end of the year. And then next year, we are looking at around 12 inaugural lectures at this faculty. This is the biggest faculty in the whole university and the most productive in terms of research, teaching and learning, and even in terms of NRF-rated scholars. I always pride myself with that. Those who come to the inaugural lectures that I officiate in, I'm sure they can close their ears, but I will keep on repeating that this is the faculty with the highest number of NRF-rated scholars. We are now at around 90. And some faculties are at 10, 5, 2. And it's also the faculty with the highest number of B-rated scholars. Prof. Stuart Pickett himself is a B-rated scholar. I'm therefore very proud to be part of this faculty of Northwest University. The inauguration of Prof. Luke is testimony, to our continuous strive for excellence. The ritual of the inauguration of a professor originates from the European medieval times and its universities. Professorship is the highest academic achievement at the university. It is a recognition that one has reached the pinnacle or the apex in academia through research, teaching and learning, and service to the community. It therefore signifies arriving at a significant milestone in an academic career. The inauguration ritual therefore emphasizes the transition from one stage of the educational career to the next, even though in this particular instance, I note that Prof. Luke is retiring at the end of the year after serving the university and the community for over 34 years, excellently. I am certain that he will not be lost to us, as we still hope that he will continue to do the excellent work that he does, especially with his master's and doctoral supervision of students, and to continue to carry his own research. Colleagues, the inaugural lecture allows a new full professor an opportunity to share their research with a broad audience, including members of the public, in the presence of family, friends, and colleagues. I hope you will enjoy it as we celebrate this day with Prof. Luke, as we accept him into full professorship. The biography of Prof. Luke reads as follows. Luke is the third child and second son of 6 children born to the late Alan Sandham and Norma Sandham of Johannesburg. He grew up in Crosby and matriculated at Hoërskool DF Malan in 1973. Following a year of military service in the artillery in Potchefstroom, he enrolled for architecture at the University of Witwatersrand for 1 year. But heeding the call of geography, he continued with studies in geography at the Rand Afrikaans University, now the University of Johannesburg. Over the following years, he obtained a BSc in geography and mathematics, and BSc honors, MSc, and PhD, all in geography. He started his working career as a research assistant at Rand Afrikaans University for 2 years, and then accepted an appointment as a lecturer at the University of the North in Sovenga, now the University of Limpopo, for 3 years. In 1987, he was appointed as senior lecturer at Puck University, now Northwest University, where he has remained while gaining promotion to associate professor and now to professor. He was subject chair of geography for 10 years during the period 2000 and 2016. It's 10 years actually, but here it says, it's 16 years, but here it says 10 years. Served on various faculty committees and acted as executive dean of humanities for the first 4 months of 2021. His teaching involvement has been wide-ranging, covering physical geography, spatial methods, philosophy of science, and environmental management, from first year to honors. As a member and supervisor, he has supervised 61 masters and 2 doctoral students. His research was initially centered around remote sensing and image interpretation, but in 2000, following the growth of environmental management at Northwest University, he shifted his focus to the effectiveness of environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment, and most recently, in conjunction with postgraduate students, also disaster risk assessment and festival geographies. He has published 36 papers in peer-reviewed journals and conference proceedings, and co-authored 4 book chapters. He has presented 13 papers at international conferences and 42 at South African conferences. He currently holds an NRF 2C2 rating and a Scopus index of 11. He has acted as an examiner for 78 masters and 8 PhD degrees at several South African universities, and moderated courses for Stellenbosch University, UNISA, and the University of Johannesburg. He frequently reviews project proposals and rating applications for the NRF, and has served on 5 external review panels for geography departments in South Africa. He has reviewed over 40 papers for scientific journals and serves on the editorial board of the South African Geographical Journal. He is the past president of the Society of the South African Geographers. He has been married, happily married, I must add, to Eleanor for 38 years, and they are the parents of Debbie and Helen. Colleagues, Deputy Vice Chancellor, I present to you Prof. Luke Sandham.
Madam DVC, Professor Linda du Plessis, Deputy Deans, Directors, colleagues, family and friends. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight on this marvelous, once-in-a-lifetime occasion. And I'm so glad you could come. It's really wonderful to see all these faces. Expectant, not bored yet, I trust. And Professor du Plessis, to you as representing the university senior leadership, my thanks for reposing in me the trust to occupy the office of Professor. And I hope to show you tonight that the trust is not misplaced. I've titled my talk, Geography, a Science for the Ages. At first it was for all ages, but then it sounded too much like a children's movie, so I thought Science for the Ages is better. And the reason for that will become evident. I'm a geographer, have been for many years, and when I say that to people, or they ask me, what do I do, then and I say I'm a geographer, the answer is always, what does a geographer do? And so I want to read a quote from the book by Peter Gould. The book's called The Geographer at Work, in which he's in this situation at a cocktail party, and they say, he's a geographer, and they say, really, a geographer? And he says, yes, a geographer. I said with that quietly enthusiastic confidence that trips so easily from the tongues of doctors, engineers, airline pilots, truckers, sailors, and tramps. After all, everybody knows what they do. And off the conversation goes into the new bridge, or the new epidemic, or the latest jet, and so on. But the geographer, nobody knows what to say. So that's why they ask, what does a geographer do? And Peter Gould then goes on to try and explain. And he finds it very difficult because people don't know the terms. And one of the ways of explaining is to say, to give a concrete example. For example, we are using a part stochastic, part deterministic computer simulation model to examine the threshold values in a regional development program. But then the people look at him and look like he's completely mad, and it looks like he's just making up jargon to confuse them. And so in the end, he ends up telling them, well, I teach geography. And they say, oh, that's wonderful. I had geography in the 7th grade. What's the capital of North Dakota? And we tried that on my brother-in-law the other night, and he had pretty much the same response, except for him, I think it was, well, Standard 4 is the 6th grade, so it was spot on. And he then proceeds to explain various things that geographers do to show the relevance of the discipline. And I'm not going to go into detail with him now. And then he says, there's no parody really, because that's what people think geographers do. They know where everything is, and they know where everything is on a map. That's why they ask you, where's the capital of North Dakota? And that can be quite frustrating, because it's not the entire truth. It's part of the truth, yes. Geographers do know where things are, and we have a duty to teach children about the world they live in, like we have a duty to teach them maths and art and music. But geography is more than that. And, for example, the issue of space, not outer space, the geographic space of the earth we live in, how that functions and what happens in that space, and how things that happen in one place are related to something that happens in another place. If the ocean waters off Peru warm up in a season, then Australia has droughts 15,000 kilometers away, and many other such events, that what happens in one place affects what happens in another place. In fact, I must just mention what is called Waldo Tobler's law. The closer things are, the more the same they are. So place matters. And this is the spatial perspective that geography provides. And so there are many examples like mapping election wards, or determining the optimal location of a new bank or of a new shopping center. The study of disease spreads, epidemiology, of which we've had very close knowledge in recent times. But then he concludes his demonstration by saying, well, that's what I want to tell you in this book. And so the next time somebody says to me at a cocktail party, oh, you're the geographer, what exactly do you do? Then I'm going to say, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I just happen to have a little book on me. And I will reach into my pocket and hand him The Geographer at Work. And perhaps that way the glad tidings will spread. even to those living in the capital of North Dakota. And there it is. Now you know too. North Dakota, by the way, is right, that's Canada on the other side of that border. So that's telling you, introducing the concept of that we need to know what geographers do. Sometimes we as geographers also forget why we're there. And so I want to talk about the origins of geography. So what I want to show you in this presentation is something of the history of geography, bringing it closer and closer and closer in time and in space, right down to geography at Potch and to me personally, and then end with 2 examples of why geography is still relevant and essential today. So going to the origins of geography, there are 3 main periods, and that is why geography is at the same time an old and a young science. Its roots go back to classical time, classical Greece, 2,000 years before Christ, but it also only became an established discipline in universities and a profession in which people could qualify and earn a living towards the 1860s. It's old and young. And the father is regarded as Eratosthenes of Cyrene, who lived around about 276 years, 294 years before Christ. And he was a Greek polymath, which means he was expert in a whole number of fields. He was a geographer, a mathematician, a poet, an astronomer, music theorist. He was not the only polymath. There were many others before him, Thales, Anaximander, Herodotus. But he was the first one that made use of the word geography, from the Greek ge, which means the earth, and graphe, which means to describe. Now, I see my one ministerial colleague might be checking my Greek out. I'm on the spot here, Javi, you must correct me. But that is very much what geography does. Not all of it, but a lot of it. He used the first one to calculate the circumference of the Earth, and he was remarkably accurate. He was the first one to calculate the tilt of the Earth's axis. He was also the first one to create a map of the world, incorporating the knowledge of the time with parallels and meridians. And then also, he was the chief librarian at the Library of Alexandria. Now, that's equivalent to being the head of a very big university, because that was a major repository of knowledge and scientific writings at the time. Now, here's his map, and you will recognize how accurate the outline of the Mediterranean Sea is. It's got the Red Sea, it's got the Persian Gulf, it's got the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, even got England and Ireland over there, even though they are a bit distorted. And interestingly, he shows that Africa does have a southern boundary. Now, that was based on the reports of the Phoenicians, who were a great seafaring race before the Greeks in what is now Syria and Lebanon. And they had, in fact, sailed around Africa in this direction. And this part of the world was really based on the knowledge of the conquest of Alexander the Great, who had extended his empire all the way into Central Asia and right up to the borders of India, including Afghanistan. Then, a further thing about him is that he yearned to understand the complexities of the entire world. He wanted to see it in its totality. And that is the core of geography, to see the interaction of mankind and the environment. Interaction, not just the one on the other. And that is at the heart of geography, that interaction in a specific spatial context. After that came, or rather that classical period which begins with him, carrying on till 1850, I've called it the age of the polymaths, because all the great figures who contributed were people who were skilled in many disciplines. And some people claim them for mathematics or for astronomy, for geography, but that was the nature of knowledge at the time. But after the Greek Empire came to an end and became dominated by the Roman Empire, thank you. Could you see I'm slurring with the sticky tongue? Thanks. There was no support for academic inquiry. That academic freedom of the Greek Empire was lost under the Romans. And at a certain stage when the Romans, 47 BC, attacked Alexandria Harbor and set the ships alight, they managed to burn the library as well, and 400,000 manuscripts were lost. So that was a huge amount of scientific knowledge that was gone. No backups, nowhere, no storage in the cloud. In fact, they went up in smoke into the clouds. And then came the Middle Ages, when the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire finally fell, and geography slumbered along with all the other sciences as part of the wider decline. With one exception, during the 7th century when Islam arose and the Islamic empire extended along the southern shores of the Mediterranean Sea and went and conquered most of Spain and Portugal as well, that time did in fact, interestingly, not stifle inquiry. You know, we tend to associate Islam with intolerance nowadays, but not at that point. And geography, maths, astronomy, they flourished in that time in centers of learning, but different centers. Cairo, not Alexandria, Algiers, and Timbuktu. And one of the prominent figures was known as Al-Khwarizmi. That's the way one can spell it in English. There are different Arabic and other kinds of ways of spelling it. He was a Persian and a mathematician. Mathematicians claim him as the father of algebra, but he was also a geographer and an astronomer, and he actually gave us the word algorithm, which we use all the time in any kind of programming. Quite a stern, serious-looking chap. Then further in the classical period, the next big event was the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. The Renaissance happened when the Eastern Roman Empire in Byzantium was finally destroyed and by the Turks, and a lot of those scientists fled to the West, and this helped to have this massive uprising of the Renaissance in science and art and various other forms of human endeavor. And along with it came the Age of Exploration, and some of the great figures, Diaz, Columbus, da Gama, Magellan. Interestingly, you'll note all Portuguese, Spanish, or Italian. And that was one of the reasons for the Age of Exploration. It was an evangelization drive to extend the influence of the church, to take back some of what the Islamic empire had occupied. And that's da Gama, that's Magellan. But of course, navigation needs maps. And so there was a great increase in mapping, and the first, most accurate shoreline maps were in fact navigational maps. They were called the Portolano maps. And they're very interesting to look at because there's this magnificently crystal clear coastline, but nothing inside, because the navigators were only interested in where they could sail. And also, of course, the voyages of James Cook in much later, who discovered a whole lot of places in the Pacific. And then by the 16th century, as this Renaissance continued, there were two fundamental innovations in the academic world. One was the rise of academic freedom and free universities, because universities up to the time had all been church universities, so they had an allegiance to the church and the church's doctrines. And that's one of the reasons why Copernicus and others ran into problems, because he had to recant his theory of the earth rotating around the sun because it didn't match the religion of the time. So we get now still the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam and the Vrije Universiteit in Berlin. That's what it means. They're not church universities. And the other major innovation was that these broad fields of learning and inquiry were divided into disciplines, which was widespread by mid-19th century. So there was now a discipline of geography and of mathematics, and it became impossible for somebody to master all of them. And these two gentlemen, both Germans, Alexander von Humboldt and Karl Ritter, both died in 1859, and they were the last of the polymaths. That's why I've called this the age of the polymaths. Because after them, there was nobody again that had that massive width and breadth of knowledge. So now that brings us to the modern period. In fact, just to end, Karl Ritter was the first professor of geography at the University of Berlin until his death in 1859. That brings us to the modern period, which is about 100 years long. And I just want to list the main characterizing features of this age or period. It was the establishment of geography as a discipline in university departments around the world, starting in Europe, but spreading. It was a very strong descriptive tradition, lots of mapping of land use. There were regional checklists and inventories, and these were sometimes consolidated into a regional monograph which describes in detail the features of the physical and human environment of a region. In fact, we've got a book that some of us, I don't know if you did, Stewart did at university, John Wellington's Book of South Africa, 2 volumes in which he, in the early 1920s and 30s, painstakingly mapped out a whole lot of the features of South Africa. Unfortunately, the geological parts are still the same, but the human parts have changed a lot. And a major function of geography was also to train school teachers. So many departments, including our one, here at Potch for many years functioned really as a training of school teachers, but with good consequences, as I'll show you shortly. And that is also the time that we started getting the sub-disciplines in geography: geomorphology, climatology, biogeography, urban, economic, political geography, and so on. There are many more. So those were the characteristics of that time, and there were many leading figures, there were many paradigms, things like determinism, and possibilism, and probabilism, that featured and rose and declined. But I don't want to go into all that detail, because we can now come to the contemporary period from around about 1960, and it's called the quantitative evolution or revolution. And the older people, the oldies in the discipline said, no, it's evolution, it was just normal change, it was happening anyway. But the young Turks said, no, it's a revolution, it's the dramatic change that happened here. But what we saw, and that's what these two graphs show, is a rapid increase in the use of terms, and in this case, they were counted in the titles of articles that were published in English language journals, USA, Canada, and the UK. And these three words were, in this one is regional, model, spatial, and this one, theory, structure, and planning. Now, just note, please, these scales are not the same. That goes up to 70, that goes only up to 30. So these words had lesser prominence, or lesser numbers, but very similar trends. And it's a typical S-shaped curve of an innovation. Initially slow growth, then rapid explosive growth, and then tapering and maintaining that plateau. And what these new terms did is they reflected a new way of thinking. For example, a model of land use patterns is an attempt at understanding and explaining land use, which is very different from mapping the land use in a specific region. So that was the beginning of this revolution, which is still really going on. This ends in the 80s. That's the source I got it from. I'm not aware of much more recent work. But if we continue into more recent times, we're going to find the same pattern for more recent words. And some of you are looking for some interesting projects for your third years or honors students. Here's a nice one. If we take words like environmental management or sustainability, GIS, resilience, global warming, visual impact assessment, environmental impact assessment, all of those are terms which have come more recently and which will more than likely show a similar pattern if we started mapping their occurrence. And again, they reflect a new way of thinking. For example, with resilience, if there's an effort to understand and explain how communities respond to adversity, that's really different from going to one community and saying, well, what happened to you and how can we help you and how many people died or how many people are sick or how many houses fell down with an earthquake. It's trying to understand at a much better level how the system works. And so we can do the same for all of these terms. And at this point, that's all I want to say about that contemporary period, because it just actually gets far too big in a short time like this. So now I want to, in time, come closer and in space zoom in a little bit to geography in South Africa. I've just got this one slide. And what I want to show you here are the universities, when geography was established and its age. And we see the oldest geography department is Stellenbosch, which started in 1914, when I think they were still the Victoria College. They are celebrating Stellenbosch, celebrating, I think, 100 years this year, but they already existed as the Victoria College, and that's when their geography started. Then Wits, Pretoria, Rhodes, Free State, and then us. In 1934, geography started, yeah? Cape Town, Natal, at Durban, the Durban campus, Fort Hare, UNISA, the Military Academy, which is the faculty of Stellenbosch. And then interestingly, these are colored yellow are the ones that started from 1960 onwards. And most of them are the formerly or historically black universities. So this reflects in the university educational landscape the impact of the apartheid, the grand apartheid policies. And all these universities, University of the North, Western Cape, Zulu, and Durban-Westville, not Port Elizabeth and Rao directly, although Rao was very much a university for the Afrikaners on the reef. That's why it's called the Rand Afrikaans University. The University of Transkei, Botswana, Venda, Vista were all products of the big doctrine of apartheid. Then, after the new dispensation, Monash, which is a franchise-type university, and the University of Mpumalanga and Solplaatje are the youngest ones. But all of them have got geography. So those are all our universities, they've all got geography. And mostly it was established along with the university. So it didn't come much later. When the university established, geography was there. And it straddles the modern and the contemporary periods, as we could see just now, up to 9. Interestingly enough, the advent of the apartheid universities really came with the growth of, with the change worldwide in geography, the quantitative revolution. And now I'm going to zoom in some more to geography at Potchefstroom, and James and Adeline and others. I'm not speaking about the other campuses, because Vaal did have geography for a short while in the 70s, but as part of Potch, they were a branch of us. It wasn't really a separate campus, and Mafeking was a different university altogether. So what I'm talking about here is just what happened here in Potch. It was founded in 1934. The first head was Professor Jan van der Merwe, Oom Jan, as he was known. And then there were also 3 periods. Up to 1970, it was really only offered degree programs, and that was when it was primarily a teacher training university. That was the main product. Then from the until 1998, it started adding diplomas and postgraduate studies. And then from 1998 until now, it's become a fully fledged teaching and research department, which is growing stronger all the time. During that time, 3 disciplines budded off and became independent from geography. Firstly, geology in 1946, then town regional planning in 1970, and soil science in 1971. And these were our humble beginnings, and we've moved about 5 or 6 times. So geography is a fairly nomadic kind of discipline as far as its offices are concerned. This is the graph of permanent academic staff right up to now. And there you can see the long looming presence, but not a black, dark presence of Professor Jan for all that time. And here's all the different people right up to where we are now, Christou and Livu and so on. So all of us here, his names are here too. But what do you see if you take away a number of these short little one-year appointments, that we've only got about 35 staff altogether that have been here. And that shows a relative degree of stability in terms of staff turnover. And that's the department. There's my thing. And then I just wanted to make a notice here of Johan Nel. Johan, you're getting an honorable mention. Where's the camera? I'll explain that in a moment. So this is our department. Now I'm going to move to my own work. And I want to introduce this concept of geography and environmental management. In the 1980s, we had the advent of environmental management in our department. We were still a department then, which includes environmental impact assessment, and this was spearheaded by Johan Nel with his appointment in 1988. And I quickly want to define these 2 terms. Environmental management, abbreviated EM, it's the management not of the environment, but of human actions to achieve sustainability in the natural environment. That's a very brief definition, but it will suffice for now. And then one of the tools, there are many tools of environmental management, one of them, and the most widely used, is called environmental impact assessment, and what that entails is to assess in advance whether the proposed development project will have adverse impacts on human and biophysical environment. And if so, what mitigation will be done, or what alternatives are considered, or whether it will be allowed at all. It's been mandatory in South Africa by law since 1998. By 2012, virtually all countries in the world had EIA legislation at least, and it's one of the most widely used environmental management tools. I just wanted to introduce that concept. So what happened with environmental management we started introducing it in the 1980s, 1990s, 1989, 90, it started at master's level. But it also gained a foothold in most other geography departments in South Africa, and almost all the geography departments included environment into their name. Environmental science, environmental studies, or environmental and geographical studies, various ways. But the academic home of geography for EM is actually contested. There are different views. Not everybody agrees that it belongs in geography. I am of the view that it does belong in geography, and I know Francois doesn't always agree with me, but I'll try and support my viewpoint. The fact is, impacts that we try to assess in advance happen in a place. They've got a location, and they're connected to other elements of the environment. And that gives geographers an enormous advantage because of our holistic, integrated spatial perspective. We don't look at things from too closely. Some sciences study items that are too small for the human eye. Geography tends to study things that are too big for the human eye. It's difficult to see a whole city in one go. It's difficult than taking a sample of water and zooming in and looking at the microbes. So some sciences need greater magnification, stronger and stronger microscopes. Geographers generally need to stand back a little bit so that they can see the bigger picture more clearly. And I love this line from the poet Jacquetta Hawkes, who said, "From too close looking follows loss of sight." And geographers are terrified of loss of sight, so we don't look too closely. If you'd understand why they think we're sometimes superficial. Geographers are not superficial, they are specialists in the big picture. And because in environmental assessment, the bigger picture is usually more important. It's all very well discovering a new species that's being affected by some pollutant. It's more important to know what's happening with the community that uses that water and where that water goes to and where it comes from. So now I want to focus in on my own research, and I must acknowledge the contribution and collaboration of colleagues and students. It's a team effort. So if I talk about my work, you say, but actually it's mine, Leandri, Mana, okay, it's ours. So I'm bragging with your work as well. And there are 5 areas I want to address. The other EI, environmental assessment and geography, the effectiveness of EI with specific focus on the report quality, social impact assessment and disaster risk assessment, geographies of festivals, and EIA in Africa. So I'll try and do them. Can I just check, what's my time? Timing, Lizelle? I've got 20. 20 finished or 20 left? 20 left. Thank you, Lillian. All right, so firstly, the whole issue of the home of geography, or the home of environmental management in geography. And so Francois and I wrote a paper on environmental assessment and geography competences. And the core competences of geography, as we got them from the South African Educational Authority notes, regard holistic, interdisciplinary, and spatial thinking as a core competence. With the emergence of environmental management, and particularly of environmental assessment in recent decades, it's demonstrated how these competences underpin both practice and research in the EIA. So looking at practice, where there are significant contributions from geography, which we see in the extent of environmental assessment training in geography curricula. Most curricula have some environmental assessment in them, geography curricula, I must emphasize. Also the way that geography competences are have been taken up in environmental assessment practitioner training. Now, EAP stands for Environmental Assessment Practitioner. Those are the people who actually do environmental impact assessments. There's a growing registration body, and so they require that people have certain competences, and most of their competences are found in geography curriculum. And the result is a body of skilled and dedicated environmental assessment practitioners. As far as the contribution of geography to the research, well, a telling part of peer-reviewed research regarding environmental assessment in South Africa is by geographers and or people who are in geography departments, not necessarily geography trained from undergrad. And so the conclusion is that geography is the principal disciplinary home of EA, or academic home, for training and research. But of course, there are other homes, potential homes as well. The next topic I want to deal is the one that I've actually spent most research time on, and most of my articles have come out of this field, and it's to do with the quality of EIA reports. And just briefly to give you the rationale for studying EIA report quality as a component of the effectiveness of environmental impact assessment. So the way it works is, if somebody wants to do a project, they need to get authorization. They've got to go through an EIA process, and then a decision is made. Either this project is approved or it's not approved. And mostly they are approved because the environmental assessment practitioners avoid the bad impacts in advance. But the decision that is given by the authority is based largely on the content of the report, the EIA report. And so we have got a premise. We assume that a good decision, and a good decision is one that enhances sustainability, is more likely from a high-quality report. But it's not guaranteed. You can have a good report with a bad decision, and you can have a bad report with a good decision. Now, this is typically the role of the official. A competent official can make a good decision on a bad report, and an incompetent official can make a bad decision on a good report. But the likelihood for a good decision improves with the quality of, or the likelihood increases as the quality of the report increases. Now, how do you measure the quality? We make use of review packages. Is my mouse invisible? Sorry, I have been using my mouse and pointing and nobody's told me. There. Is it way there? Where is my... Oh, here we are. Sorry. There, can we see that? All right. So we use review packages, which are really a whole set of criteria, multi-tier. The one we use is at 4 levels, a whole lot at the lowest level that are then cascaded upwards until eventually one gets a single criterion for the report as a whole. At every level, every criterion is measured against on an A to F6 level Likert scale. And take note, it's a qualitative scale, not a quantitative scale. And in this, we review or evaluate every relevant aspect of the AI process for the project, and we measure against best practice, not just against minimum compliance. But there's a big warning here that this report quality is only one dimension of AI effectiveness. So there are many other dimensions which are being explored by colleagues. Mine has focused mostly on the report quality. And just briefly to show you, this is the outcome of such an evaluation. In this case, each column here represents one project, and each of these little cells is a criterion. You see some of them have got 3 or 2 or 1 number, that the 3 digits is the lowest level, then they cascade up into the third level, into the second, and overall score for the report as well. And these have been color-coded. Greens represent satisfactory performance, red and orange represent unsatisfactory performance, and so one can easily see certain areas are areas of poor performance where attention is needed, and others are areas of strong importance. So that's how report quality works. And we've published a number of articles. This was the first one, which is quite a favorite because it's become a sort of a citation classic. It was the first report quality work done in South Africa, so it's got lots of citations, even though there's more interesting work that's come later. And we've applied this to a whole number of different sectors and scenarios for wetlands, for mining, for biological control. And the EIs were particularly bad in biological control, which is actually an exception. We've applied for railway projects. We've looked at improvement over time with different regulatory changes. We've looked at the quality of national parks, housing developments, quality of biodiversity inputs, projects affecting military activities. This is one I'm busy writing up at the moment. And the conclusions of all of this broadly, the findings, is that we're in line with international trends in South Africa, which makes sense because our practitioners engage regularly with international colleagues. They are mostly satisfactory in the descriptive parts, which are the easier parts. But in the more difficult parts, there's weaker performance. For example, impact significance, which is for answer the holy grail, is that right? Mitigation alternatives tend to perform not so well at all. And we find that we have a body of competent practitioners, which shows that the core competences of geography are coming through into the practitioners. Some further specialities about impact assessment, about why should EI report quality be part of geography? Well, I've listed a few here. A development project is location bound. And sometimes when we do practice, I do exercises with students that they get a report, and in class we do some evaluation. You can look, is there a fatal flaw? Now, if, for example, the report never had this location, it would be a fatal flaw. No matter how good everything else in the report is, all other 55 criteria can be A's. If you don't know where it is, it's a useless report. Now, that never happens, fortunately, but that's to show how fundamentally important location is. Everything begins where something is. Significance, to determine significance, there are formulae, but 2 of them are size and spatial extent. If an impact is local or regional or national or international, well, that will change the significance of that impact. For example, we know some of our air pollution circulates at a continental level. Animals and plants, they are distributed in space. Animals can move, plants generally can't move, except through their seeds. The economic impacts, they link to a location. The social impacts, well, they're where the people are, or where the people are going to, or coming from. Visual impacts, well, that depends on the location of the viewer. If nobody sees the impact, is there an impact? You know, the old logic question, if a tree falls in a forest, If nobody hears it, was there a sound? This one is maybe, one can think about it like that as well. And then, of course, heritage impacts, they are location bound too. And mostly you can't move them. Graves you can move. There's some archaeological companies that are called, I know one, Specialist Grave Solutions. And they can, in very specific ways, exhume graves and move them to the satisfaction of the community. So there's some whole number of issues which, to my mind, are good reason why EIA report quality belongs in geography. The third one I want to talk about is social impact assessment and disaster risk. Sorry, that should be assessment, not management. And this is the work that I've done with Leandri, she's done with me, and also Dewald. And the first one came a few years ago where we assessed the quality, the performance of social impact assessment. And then the paper that Leandri was the primary author, that social impact assessment is the lesser sibling in the South African EIA practice. It's badly neglected. But there have been a few more. And what we've looked at is the performance of social impact assessment. Now, social impact assessment, I've explained, is just the impacts that are related to people. So not impacts on the plants, but impacts on the people. And there's a very interesting comment that I had about that. So I'll mention that in a moment. So we looked at report quality, specifically for the SIA components. We've looked at how the practitioners see it. We've looked at how it can be improved by integration with disaster risk assessment in terms of the legal context, integration for increased resilience, and then also the discourses in social impact and disaster risk assessment practices. And the conclusion is that SIA tends to be neglected compared to biodiversity. There's a lot of issues about biodiversity and protecting rare scarce species, but much less attention on social impacts. And I had a wonderful example once from the Cape Flats. There was a social impact assessment about a police station that was going to be built in the Cape Flats. And this practitioner said they don't anticipate any significant social impacts from building a police station. Now, that is a baffling one to me and very disappointing. I would suggest don't bother to go ahead in that case. One would, of course, expect a positive social impact. Impacts aren't always negative. And so there's good scope for improving SIA practice, and what Leandri is exploring is the issue of how bringing in some concepts from disaster risk assessment can help to improve SIA practice to address the negligence, or the neglect, sorry. The fourth one I want to look at is the geographies of arts festivals, and this is with Mana, that we're working on his PhD. And this is just one little bit that I want to point out here, that the 5 major Afrikaans festivals that are investigated, Inibos in Nelspruit, Hartklop here in Potch, one in Bloemfontein, Klein Karoo in Oudtshoorn, and Woordfeest in Stellenbosch. And these are not the only festivals, but we picked specifically the 5 big Afrikaans festivals. Now, each of them strives for a unique character. You probably know that if you've been to any of these festivals. And the local sense of place is a major contributor to that festival atmosphere and to the character. For example, if you're in Nelspruit, it's a low veld, it's warm, it's humid, you smell wood smoke, smell of the bushveld sort of thing. If you're in Stellenbosch, you look up and you see there's one of the peaks, Simonsberg, looming over you. Those are all factors which make a contribution to that unique character of the festival. But now you found that this unique character is actually countered by the shared role players and duplication of content. For example, these nomadic stall holders. They have the same product at every festival. So do you ever see the path typically that have been mapped of some of these people? They start at Woordfeest, then they move on to the one in Bloemfontein, then they move on to some others that are not in our sample, and then they move over there. And they've got the same things. Got a trailer full of leather belts or shoes or Mampoer or something. And they do it at every festival. So this actually, and they're a very, very important part of the festivals, yet they are exactly the same. So that's a very interesting dimension that we're trying to disentangle. And we're busy exploring those spatialities. And that's why it's been called the geographies of arts festivals. There's been lots of other work on arts festivals, economic impacts and so on, or economic aspects, are they profitable, and so on. Then the last point of my research that I want to talk about is EIA in Africa. We've been working on a book chapter looking at the status of EIA practice in Africa as part of a handbook series. And we did it by looking at, through Scopus, looking for published papers, and we found 246 peer-reviewed papers on EIA in Africa. And a number of themes emerged, but I want to just look at one or two. The one is that there's a huge variation in where the papers are published. And this is a nice geographical tool I'm showing here. This is called a cartogram. That is what Africa normally looks like if you sort from space. It's a bit greener and browner, and you won't see the boundaries, but that's its outline. And in this one, what we've done is we've made the area of each country proportionate to the number of papers that are published there. That's why it bulges out here, because South Africa's got the most papers. And then a few other countries, and all those that have got nothing, we gave a nominal value of half, because you can't give naught. A country can't exist if it hasn't got any area. So it's got the smallest possible space. But it's not entirely representative, because the scale of numbers is actually exponential. So South Africa should even be a lot bigger than this. But it showed us that interesting thing, and that most of the EI work is being done actually in English-speaking countries. The Francophone and Portuguese countries have relatively few. And the other very important thing is that it comes through all the time that EIA needs to recognize the unique local context. You can't just bring in EIA principles from Europe or from Canada or from the USA. South Africa needs a unique context. Again, major spatial influence that is playing through there. So those are the 5 areas, and this is my second last conclusion. So I want to just demonstrate, I want to say now in closing, but I'm actually closing. I want to show you 2 examples of the relevance of geography today. Firstly, COVID-19, which has got a whole lot of spatial dimensions to it. The whole track and trace principle. Where were they? Where did they go? The pathways and the hotspots, the containment measures, are all to do with movement and staying in place. Because the movement of the virus has been modulated by the lockdown. We're trying to keep the virus from moving, because the virus moves with people. Social distancing, that's a spatial thing. Epidemiology, the study of the spread of diseases, is essentially spatial, and you can't loosen it from the origin-destination concept. So if you study airline travel patterns, origin-destination, and that is how diseases move too. So it's vital for understanding. And what I just want to show, I don't know how clear it is, these 2 little maps. This one shows an outbreak of flu in the time, in the middle 1700s. It started in Russia, and it took about 8 months to get to Spain. 100 years later, it only took 4 months, because the friction of distance had dropped. So by now, they had more wheeled vehicles, so there were maybe chariots, not chariots, but horse carriages that could go a lot faster than maybe ox wagons. Of course, another 150 years on, we've now got jets. So the friction of distance is almost gone. And to carry on this, I want to quote Peter Haggett, a leading British geographer. In 2001, in his book, Geography, A Global Synthesis, he wrote on the global burden of disease, and he listed geographers' 5 challenges to disease control. The first one was that disease control is likely to be less dependent on spatial barriers. That's what we've seen. We don't know, but when you see again, there's a new outbreak. It's popped out somewhere else. The first South African COVID happened in Bloemfontein, as far as I recall, the biggest outbreak. The second thing is rapid reporting and surveillance is increasingly critical because of the speed of the movement. And because of the ever-widening list of communicable diseases and the high cost of surveillance, it makes sampling essential. We can't measure everybody anymore, so we need to have these sort of watchdog sampling techniques. Geographical models will increasingly supplement other epidemiological tools in global control. In other words, how things move will become more and more important, in addition to understanding how people get infected and how to design a vaccine. And the 5th challenge is that disease control and socioeconomic development need to be more closely linked or tied together. And at that time, the World Health Organization gave disease code Z59.0 to the world's most ruthless killer, and they called it extreme poverty. Now, this we've seen happening in the last year and a half in our country. And Haggett as well then said this. He says, each century, public health has had to fight disease with the tools available and the constraints imposed at that time. In 1700s, it was the speed of an ox cart, perhaps. The 20th century will be no exception, as it prepares to fight both old diseases causing old problems old diseases causing new problems, for example, drug resistance, and as well as wholly new diseases. And over the last 2 years, we've seen how prophetic this has been. I think 20 years ago, it's exactly what happened. And it does not seem that these lessons have been learned in South Africa. We haven't applied nearly the knowledge that has been available. So that geography is relevant in this particular case. I've just picked two. The other one is the case of Afghanistan, and many of you would have seen this photograph and videos of people clinging to the wheels and falling off. It was a ghastly attempt when the Taliban took over, and many people tried to flee. But it's not the first time that that's happened in Afghanistan. In the 6th century before Christ, Darius the Great, we read about him in the Bible, of the Persian Empire, the law of the Medes and the Persians. They absorbed what is now Afghanistan into that Persian Empire. But there were constant uprisings, and so they never really established effective control. Alexander the Great, in the 3rd century, he invaded there, but it's a harsh mountainous terrain, there's brutal weather, and there's brutal Afghans, and there were constant revolts, and his rule didn't last either. Genghis Khan, the great Mongol warlord, they invaded in 1220, run by the Mongols, but he failed to destroy the strength of Islam, because by then Islam had spread to that area as well. And then the whole Islamic dimension was added to the Afghan culture. And by the time, the end of that century, his descendants also had become Muslims themselves. Britain, the British Empire, tried 3 times in those years, 1838 to 1919, all of them failed ultimately. Soviet Union in 1979 invaded with 115,000 troops and more later on, and there was an extended guerrilla war, and by 1989 they withdrew. It was part of one of the factors in the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And then USA came. Now look here, we're talking about great world powers, all 6 of them. And after 20 years, the US also had to withdraw. Now why is it so difficult? Well, a lot of it is to do with the location. If you look, there's Afghanistan, there's Iran, and there's Pakistan, and there's their boundary. So it's landlocked. It's got 7 neighbors, even a tiny little boundary with China. Yes, Pakistan, Persia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. And with that goes the fact that the local, the ethnicity is that we have a whole number of different ethnic groups. There's the Pashtun, formerly known as the Pathans, not pagans, Pathans, and they lived largely in the southeastern half of Afghanistan. Kabul, which is there, is not really traditionally Pashtun territory, and a lot of them also live here in Pakistan. So these people can move across the boundary and still be amongst their own people. There are Tajiks, they're in the north there, and they are actually Persians. They're a completely different ethnic group. And then there's 7 others of measurable size. So it's the interplay of this human and physical environment which gives a very, very complex situation which can't really be properly understood without a geographical perspective. And now I really will conclude with my own journey. Firstly, I must thank my Creator who gave us this wonderful world to explore. My parents, who neither of them went to university, but who stimulated us to think and to explore. I need to credit my 3 high school teachers. These 3 men, Mr. A.B.J. Creer, Mr. J.C. Swanepoel, and Mr. S. Creer. Ordinary men, you can see these pictures come from old school yearbooks. But they are the men who laid my geographic foundation. This gentleman who was the headmaster, he brought geography in Standard 7, where it didn't exist previously, so I was able to take it. He also taught us that year. This gentleman laid the foundations of scholarly inquiry, of integration of sources. He gave us 3 textbooks. We had to write our essays out of 3 textbooks. How about that? At school, Standard 8, that's fantastic. And another one who was our final year teacher. So over the many years, I know these 2 gentlemen have passed away. I salute them for their contributions to my life. And what is so fascinating, they were all products of geography at Potch. So we said Potch trained, its main job was training school teachers. Well, there's 3 of the products. And I was the beneficiary of that. And they were all students of Professor Jan van der Merwe, who founded geography. So it's an opposite for me to become a professor where my geographical grandfather, he's my geographical grandfather, where he established the discipline that I love so much. And then I also want to acknowledge all my university lecturers and mentors and colleagues from previous times. And then, and this is my last slide, in my own generation, I want to acknowledge Johan Nel, who introduced me to environmental management, and he suggested the topic which I've made a niche just casually. Nobody's looked at report quality yet, one Friday evening in Sendrio building. And I want to thank Kobus, who's here tonight, Kobus van der Walt, who labored with me. We pulled the wagon, just two of us, oxen, bulls, during very tough times for geography. And Francois, I want to thank you for all the many insightful perspectives and being such a marvelous co-author. He's got that wonderful phrase. I think we can put it to bed now. That's a very nice sound when its article's almost done. And then all the other colleagues, mostly younger, that I've learned so much from, and I'm going to name you: Stuart, Dirk, in no particular order, Roelof, Teens, Carly, Gewalt, Leandri, Livu, Christu, Mana, Claudine, Rees. Have I left anybody out of the geography colleagues? Not from the other campuses, I'm afraid, but I don't know them so well. But I do include them. And on the other two campuses, thank you for your contribution to my geography life. And I'm just so blessed to, like Sibet said, we must be grateful for what we've got. I've got a terrific group of people that I can associate with. And I'm convinced they're going to make and keep geography relevant for a long time. And Stuart, as the director, I just want to thank you for your style of leadership. We're really blessed in the school with a leader who leads from the front, who doesn't micromanage, gives you space to work. But look, you can expect a combination of a supercell storm and a tornado and a typhoon if you cross the line with him. But he doesn't get crossed that easily. And then, last but absolutely not least, I must thank Eleanor, my wife. Although she's not a trained geographer, she's been constant support, encouragement. Can't do anything without a good wife. It was much more difficult, I should say. And, of course, she's an excellent map reader when we explore new places. And for that, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues. Prof. David, I have to start by confessing that I do have a loyalty towards this faculty, as I received my first BSc degree from this university. I'm not going to say in which year that was, though. But really, congratulations on the achievements and the growth in your faculty. An inaugural lecture is a celebration of success for the whole faculty. And this year, the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences has really set a high benchmark. And I hope you can continue like this, because success breeds success. Prof. Luke, really congratulations on this milestone in your career. To start as a research assistant and end your career as a full professor is really an example of how one's career can progress. But I think you have convinced us tonight that the journey is more important than reaching the end. And it's clear when looking at your journey and the impact your teachers even have made, that you have also made a mark on the life of many students and staff members who crossed your path and whom you worked with in your career as a member of the Northwest University staff. Benjamin Franklin said, the recipe for successful achievement comprises the following 4 steps. Choose a career you love, give it the best there is in you, seize your opportunities, and be a member of your team. It seems like the staff members in FNAS indeed follow these steps. This week we are having engagements with all the faculties. I think natural sciences are still to come. We had economic sciences, health, and engineering today. And as part of that, I share some statistics with you. And I thought I'll just share this one statistic with you. If you look at the profile of the Northwest University at the moment, in terms of its staff, 6% of our staff members are junior lecturers, 32% are lecturers, 34% senior lecturers, 14% associate professors, and 13% full professors. So, Professor Sandham, it is clear that becoming a full professor is a huge milestone, and I can assure you that the position is well earned. Your NRF rating also confirms the quality of your work. During your presentation tonight, I really could not help to be reminded of the work of Barack Obama when he said, "The study of geography is about more than just memorizing places on a map. It's about understanding the complexity of our world, appreciating the diversity of cultures that exist across continents. And in the end, it's about using all that knowledge to help bridge divides and brings people together." So, Professor Sandham, thank you for an engaging lecture. Congratulations, and we wish you all of the best.
Lizelle would like to end proceedings tonight. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, I would like to say something just in closing on behalf of Prof. Sandham. Special thanks to the people behind the scenes, like Lizelle here, who has arranged this meeting on behalf of the faculty, Darlene and Guy van Pitties and Dube for the formal arrangements. Thanks for you again. Leslie and de Kok, who's the official photographer as usual, and then Ben Botha and his team at RS Audio Visual for the live streaming tonight. But I also like to say something to Prof. Luke on behalf of the people here when we go out here. Usually we end this function, we greet and congratulate you for being a full professor. But I think it's appropriate tonight also to thank you for your selfless contribution to this university, the people and the students for 34 years of service to this university. It's remarkable and special tonight, as we have seen, and we salute you for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now require you to stand to sing the national anthem, and afterwards you are most welcome to follow the academic procession to take some pictures at the hall where they will lead you to. Thank you.